Good afternoon. My name is Dr. McDonald. I'm the Chief Medical Officer of Rugby Australia. I've been asked to present today on the state of play in rugby, and by that I am presenting a very brief overview of the identification and on-field management processes for sports-related concussion in rugby. There's been an evolving proactive approach to concussion identification and management from all sports in recent years, driven by the sports themselves, both national and international governing bodies, but also driven independent of sports by collaborations such as the Concussion in Sport Australia collaboration between the Australian Institute of Sport, Sports Medicine Australia, the Australasian College of Sports and Exercise Physicians and the Australian Medical Association. And this collaboration has produced a position statement and working documents which are updated regularly as the science evolves and freely available at the website listed. Within rugby, we have several examples of the evolution of processes around on-field identification and management, and I'm going to focus on two processes today. Firstly, the World Rugby Head Injury Assessment process and the Rugby Australia Blue Card process. World Rugby Head Injury Assessment process commenced in 2012, and the process has been constantly refined over the years since then based on a constantly building research database. I think it's important to note that this process has limited access, and it's only for high performance teams, as I've listed on this slide. But importantly, it's not used in the general community, and certainly not in club rugby, in junior rugby, or in schools rugby for anyone aged 18 or under. And the process at these levels of the game is what is known as recognise and remove. So the process is actually a three-stage process. Most people are aware of, or many people are aware of the first stage of the process, which is an off-field in-game assessment, which lasts for a mandatory 12 minutes and is a standardised process, so that the HIA used in the UK is the same as Australia, is the same as South Africa, is the same as in Argentina. But there are two subsequent steps in the process. A same-day post-game assessment and a third assessment undertaken 36 to 40 hours post-game. The diagnosis of concussion can be made at any time in this process, but concussion can't be excluded until all stages of the assessment process are completed. And access to the HIA process requires World Rugby approval, as I've already said, and is linked to a set of World Rugby player welfare standards. It's linked to specific education for players, coaches, administrators and medical staff, and it's linked to research, which, as I noted above, has been undertaken for the 8 years that it's been running, and which guides refinement of the process. So there have been several significant outcomes of the head injury assessment process over the last few years. Firstly, there is a consistent approach to the initial management of concussion across the world, which essentially involves a repeated multimodal assessment. Secondly, there's a consistency of what is classified as concussion in rugby around the world, which again is good for management, but also in terms of research. And then thirdly, and most importantly, there's been a significant reduction in the number of players left on the field who were subsequently diagnosed with concussion. Back in 2011, this number was 56%. In the 2019 data, which has not been published yet, that number is well less than 10%. Obviously, in an ideal world, we want that to be 0%. So let's now turn to a process that's been used here in Australia over the last few years in our community game, and that is the blue card, which is a card that the referee has, in which the referee may order a player to be removed from the field of play if, in the opinion of the referee, they have either a confirmed or a suspected concussion. And this process was first trialled in 2017 and then applied nationally in 2018. It's a process that applies to all community rugby from under 13s and older, and is essentially a public acknowledgement of a head injury having occurred and being managed appropriately. Significantly, this process doesn't change the laws of the game, as the referee has always been the final arbiter of who is allowed to stay on the field. But it's involved a lot of education of players, coaches, match officials, medical staff, administrators, the general public, and particularly doctors. And I guess the final point about it is that it's a translation of concussion procedures and processes to the community level of the game. So we have processes that not only apply to the high performance end, but also to the community end. So as I noted, the referee can use the blue card to remove a player if they suspect concussion. Importantly, the referees are not diagnosing concussion, but if they suspect that a concussion injury has occurred, they can remove the player from the field of play, and that player does not return that day, which then triggers an off-field process, including a mandatory minimum stand-down period and medical assessment. And we have a central recording process of incidents that allows us to analyse statistics. So the general principles of the blue card are that we are attempting to establish a collaborative approach to the management of concussion. In other words, all parties are responsible for the appropriate management of an injured person, whether you are a coach, a player, an administrator, a match official, or medical or first aid staff. The management of the process occurs at the competition manager level, but difficult cases or cases that cause controversy can be referred to the Rugby Australia staff, and specifically my role as Chief Medical Officer, or our concussion consultant can have their opinions sought in the case of difficult cases. And then finally, there have been a couple of paradigm changes that are at play. Firstly, diagnosed or confirmed concussion and suspected concussion are treated identically in this process, and so that any player presenting with signs or symptoms of concussion in the presence of a potential head injury are considered to be suffering from concussion unless an alternative diagnosis can be provided. As I noted at the start of this overview, this is a very brief summary of just a couple of things that have been done within the sport of rugby to improve the on-field identification and management of concussion over the last few years. There is certainly a lot more to this story, and there's certainly a lot more information around the things I've discussed today. So you can see that the World Rugby website, the Rugby Australia website, and the Concussion in Sport Australia website are all sources of very good information if you wish to find out a bit more. Thank you.